So it's 3:04. I don't know why there is a slow entering into the class, but anyway, we are 11. We may begin. So last time, of course, just to remind ourselves, we began with the macro part of this course, and we began by discussing the issues of increased price levels, what we refer to as inflation. And we saw the types, causes, consequences of inflation. So today we begin on a related bit, subtopic anyway, but quite related because normally you find even the frameworks are used in determining the two more often than not are similar. And that is unemployment. What is unemployment? How do we understand the notion of unemployment from an economics point of view? But perhaps before I begin, I think one of you pointed out to me that there was a clash between the group and ECON 100. And yesterday I visited the Directorate of Timetabling, and you agreed that the exam will be pushed forward by 3 hours. So the new exam time is the same date, but now we shall be doing it from 12 to 2 at, I believe, Kennedy, the place where we were supposed to have the class. I think one of the class where we met, the first class, that will be the venue, if I remember correctly. So that is the message. Of course, today I received another clash on the same, but I'm happy to report that that clash, which was involving one of us, has been resolved to our satisfaction. So this hour remains 9th of December, 12 to 2, Kennedy Dining Hall. And of course, there will be a final timetable that I believe will be out next week. It will be having that new time, right? So unemployment, on the aspect of a cut, I believe, as we said, we must finish the course first before we even think about the cut. But be that as it may, I believe the course, one way or another, will be over by next week. So if we said on Monday, let's see how far we can go today, and then we can decide on the cut date. Maybe next Monday, if not Monday, maybe. I'm highly doubting whether we shall have prosecuted the two remaining topics by Monday. But if we can surprise ourselves today, why not have it on Monday? But tentatively, let's just even put it next week on Thursday so that we do not really pressurize ourselves unduly in terms of the cut. Now, of course, tunajua, when we talk about unemployment, the thing that comes to most people's mind is kukosa kazi. And when you talk about kukosa kazi, that will be speaking to one and only one aspect of unemployment. And yet we know that when we talk about unemployment, it can be the case from an economic point of view that if we talk about factors of production. And by now, I think we have discussed them for you to know that there are three: land, labor, and capital. If this is the case, that we have these factors, can we talk about all of them? Being unemployed? Short answer, yes. But having said that, of course, we shall zero in unapologetically on the most important type of unemployment, that which we shall be referring to as labor unemployment. But if you think about that first definition of unemployment, that actually accommodates the three factors of production. Land can be unemployed, labor can be unemployed, capital can also be unemployed. Now, Kenya, hapa, you don't even need to be told stories about land being unemployed. We know, and we have examples whereby people grab land and years later, you find them not really maximizing on their use. Where on Akosa land, somebody else has land the size of, I'm told, Nyanza province. So that's an example of land unemployment. Time was when I used to, whenever I could go home and I pass Salga area, I used to feel so defeated because to your right, there used to be this very, very big land that Kenyatas, don't know whether they bought, I don't know whether they appropriated, but it was theirs. And for the longest time, you could just see just land, it not being used. But I think when Uhuru became president, I think maybe alipata tu hela ama pengine waliamua kuitumia. Nowadays, I can see at least they are attempting to plant avocados there. So at least I'm a bit relieved, as big a land as it is, that is being put in good use. Can talk about capital being unemployed. Kama uko na machinery mahali as part of a company, and maybe you are not using it or you are underutilizing it, that will be an example of capital unemployment at the end of the day. But as I said, because labor, kukosa kazi, speaks to the one factor, which is labor, let us zero in there and let's basically discuss it in earnest. And by that, we shall define it in that way. And this is a definition that was given by the United Nations Development Program some time back, and who defined labor unemployment as a situation whereby a person of a working age who is willing and qualified for full-time employment at the going wage rate is not able to find work. Okay. So a situation existing in an economy whereby a person of a working age, willing and qualified for full-time employment at the going wage rate is not able to find work. There are many types, but when you talk about measurement, you'll always hear with regard to Americans, especially. America is one country which I don't know whether I respect it or not, but they are very statistically driven. And when you talk about even research nowadays, we talk about evidence-based research. So you'll always hear them coming up with this statistics. And I think every month, kwa wale ambao wanasikiza hizi international media, you'll always hear them, I think the first of every month, coming up with the unemployment rate in America. Nowadays, I don't trust their population to make the right decision based on these statistics. But a time was when this used to basically provide a basis for very robust discussion among the citizenry in terms of where the economy is going, who is responsible, should we elect Hillary, should we elect Kamala, should we elect Trump, right? Nowadays, I'm not very, very sure. about them. So this is how they used to calculate it. It's simply the total workforce, number of unemployed over the total workforce multiplied by 100. I believe nowadays it's a figure that ranges between 3.9 to, is it 3.9% in the US to, I think I've heard over the last 1 year, a high of 5%. So very, very low unemployment rate. In Africa, in Kenya, you always hear this actually approaching something like 40%. So comparatively, you can see Americans having it very, very better in terms of enjoying a better unemployment rate comparatively, right? But this is a formula that they use to determine whether they should be tweaking their policy as a result of maybe the number of people who are out of work or the number of people who are at work. So what are these types? Right, we have what we call open involuntary unemployment, when a person is willing, qualified for full-time work at the going wage rate, is not able to find work. So it is involuntary, because actually you can see there is that aspect of willingness in unemployment. Kuna mtu anaweza kuforce utafute kazi ama ufanye kazi. And when you go, especially in this developed country where they have their social safety nets, you cannot really dismiss the fact that there will be people in these countries who will just refuse to work as a result of the ability of these social safety nets. Na hata ukisikia hata some of the debates that some politicians are putting forth, they are saying that we should do away with this safety net so that if you don't work, you die. Haukui a headache to the whole society as a result of you just deciding not to do what? Not to work. And for the last 20 or so years, you have actually seen them really cutting down on this safety nets, especially when you talk about the UK, when you talk about America, when you talk about countries like Canada. This really coming. But of course, also because the economies are not really performing well. When those policies were put in place, ziliwekwa maybe watu wachache. Siku hizi, there are people who are coming from all over the world, going to those countries because they have been promised heaven. The people who go to those countries and they take a lot out of the economy by this, at least at the point at which they are willing to work. So sometimes unakuta ya kuwa, they are saying, why don't we do away with it? Now even Trump, I know for one, is very, very anti these social safety nets, right? So let's see what the next 4 years yield. But I'm predicting that America might not be such a beautiful place to go into for people who always have that American dream. If you're in Africa and you still have that American dream, it might be that bit harder going forward. Unemployment can also be disguised, right? Kuna kazi zingine ambazo they are structured in such a way that maybe you find that there is no that work that can justify you going and spending 8 hours doing something, right? So the labor is underutilized, and that disguised or hiddenness is seen in that way. Right? And you know, here in Kenya nowadays, we can talk about also the county governments, wachana hata na civil service. I think right now, a good number of county governments are trying to correct for the fact that in the first 10 years of county governments, there was a lot of employment. Maybe even we ended up employing people when there was no work for them to do. Or maybe even the way we had envisaged those work maybe does not exist anymore. Or some people even just refusing to work because they are so-and-so's relatives. There's also that aspect. So mean there'll be people who will be working twice as hard, other people not working at all. Bottom line, this labor is underutilized. Work available is insufficient to keep it fully occupied. And in that case, we talk about the marginal product of labor being zero as a result. Okay. Hii niliandika civil service, I think, when the memories of Moi government. But by the time nilikuwa naiandika, I think Kibaki had really streamlined the service. I don't know whether they have gone back to their bad habits or not, but with corruption also, that might be an indicator that maybe these bad habits are still prevalent in this kind of markets. Unemployment can be structural, right? And even right now, with the proliferation of ICT, and especially things like AI coming in, you are arguably having more efficient ways of doing work, whereby even some work that was manual, nowadays having the possibility of the same being automated. I always tell people, my students, that maybe we are the last lecturers that will be tasked with maybe appearing at a certain hour and teaching. Maybe the next 10, 20 years, there will be an AI voice teaching this course and giving you people exams and cuts and giving you people hell, and not really a person like me, right? So whenever there is an imbalance between the demand of certain cadre of labor and the supply, of course, and we are living it in many, many ways. I cannot really overemphasize this. When I was in the university, giving me an assignment, to submit a typed assignment used to be the biggest headache ever. It used to be a very, very big headache in a way that you people, you cannot even really begin to wrap around your heads. Because nowadays you go, maybe every two friend of you has a laptop or has an access to a desktop somewhere. And nowadays, these were rarities. Even the departments, there were no laptops or even computers. And even when they were there was a question of whether even you had the know-how to use them, right? These are things that happened in my lifetime. And I saw them and I witnessed them. So a lecturer could come and tell us, hand over a typed assignment, and we could really, really, really argue until they give up and they tell us, fine, go write it out by hand and submit the same. So secretaries were very, very important for us, because the 1 or 2 times lecturers could really insist that that assignment must be typed, or you lose the marks and maybe you have to retake. And for a student, when you hear about a retake, you would want to move the hell and earth so that you avoid it, right? So they are very, very important. Right now, I cannot remember the last time our secretary ever had to do for me anything. Because anything I need, I type it in my laptop, I sign it in my laptop, I send to her by email. Sasa kazi yake ni ensure that it reaches the office as needed. Peke yake. Hizo za typing za nini, maybe a bit of organizing the office maybe, but not typing. Nowadays, I don't even hear about typists if it's not in the government. Na ni watu pengine wao walikuwa wameemployiwa zamani sana, not even now. Because there's no rationale. Everybody can type. Everybody can type. So everybody can format a document, right? And even more besides. So that skill has been superseded. So the rationale of having people working in such spaces becomes moot. And you can see actually whole cadres of work having disappeared. Right? If you go to the Maju, there's something now that now they are calling the gig economy, whereby actually previously high valued skills have either disappeared or if they exist, they are even just being contracted at very, very small sums of money at the end of the day, simply because maybe that the need for such skills have been obviated. People have moved on. And if there's anything to blame, is this ICT sector. And AI, for the last 1 week, I think I've been interested. And in my YouTube page, I see me being brought videos of how the 80s were or how the 70s were. And I think I watched one or two of them. And you realize, anyway, I used to see those things as a young boy. I no longer see those things anymore. That's just how the world works. At some point, some skills are become moot. The need for such skills become moot because either everybody has that ability, so their value crashes, or even the need for that skill just is not there. There used to be time where there used to be lift operators. Can you imagine? Employed with pension and all that. Mm. So that's what we call structural employment. Some employment just arising simply because the need for such jobs uh, disappears. General unemployment, as opposed to the need structural. Structural is with respect to certain points and sectors within a given economy. But sometimes it might be that. And especially as a result of AI, that's why I'm saying that I'm not very, very sure that there will be very, very many skills that will not be affected. And nowadays, you hear people talking about the need to learn and learn and relearn. And that applies, I think, across the board. Simply because even me, I cannot take it for granted that I'll be 10 years from now, my skill set will still be needed. Maybe students siku hizi watasema, we don't like people with Luo accents, so I'd rather have this AI na pengine Igato litakuwa imewapatia those AI voices as an option. Maybe they'll be even be much, much more efficient than I ever could be, right? In terms of anticipating each and every person's specific needs and catering to them. So it might be that at that time there'll be general unemployment at the end of the day, because I think that this is something that will now be widespread throughout a given economy rather than just being restricted to a specific part of the economy, right? Sometimes economies, the unemployment is seasonal. Some sectors like agriculture, tourism, and those are actually the two biggest sectors in Kenya, are by their very nature season. So you'll find demand for some cadres of jobs basically being seasonal by nature. Here in the tourism sector, you always hear the low season and the high season. And in the low season, at a coast, you'll find actually some hotels literally closed up, waiting for the high season. You go there in the high season, it's as if they never closed even for 1 minute at the end of the day, right? Sometimes as you maybe wait to transit from one job to another, uh, some type of unemployment might arise, and we call that kind of unemployment frictional, in the sense that in transiting from one job changes are never smooth, or okay, not never, but they are rarely smooth. Sometimes you have to resign from a job and wait maybe a month or two to get another job, or sometimes because of some economic downturn. Saizi nasikia ni kama I think the news is that I think G4S is laying off people. Thailand Capex Center is laying off people, and I think about there are some 3 or 4 companies right now that have put in place notices for redundancy. So these are the people who expect at some point to be out of a job. And maybe there are some people whose skill sets are such that maybe they'll be snapped up by other companies, regardless of the way the economy works. But there will be that odd 1 or 2 or 3 months where they shall be unemployed. So labor because of this immobility of labor, sometimes unemployment that is called frictional unemployment results. Imagine that maybe sometimes you are immigrating outside the country. Mnasikia wengine wanaendanga Gulf, wengine wanaenda wapi? US, UK, right? And sometimes you're in a job. So you have to resign from this job most of the time. So there will be that 1 month or 2 months whereby you'll be jobless as you prepare to transit from here to the Gulf or the UK or the US as the case may be. So labor by its very, very nature, it's not mobile the way we would have alluded to in topic 5 when we were talking about perfect factor mobility. But the reality is that there is that immobility that basically gives rise to frictional unemployment at the end of the day. As one prepares to transit from one job to another, there'll be that time, month or two, whereby you will be regarded for to all intents and purposes to be unemployed. Sometimes because of the economy. Na saizi nadhani hata Kenya, I think I can believe that we are maybe at this level. Wakati unasikia this company is actually laying down, laying people off. Yeah, because the economy is not performing the way one would expect it to. And sometimes not because, even despite our best efforts, economies are subject to what we call economic or business cycles. Right? Kuna wakati economy ina perform vizuri, kuna wakati inazembea. Ina perform vizuri, inazembea, and so on and so forth. So whenever it is in a kind of a recession, what we call recession basically meaning a decline in economic activities, normally you find people being laid off, right? Not really because the economy or people are not doing their best from a political angle, but simply for the reason that there are these cycles that are an inevitable part of economy. Increase in economic activities, decrease in economic activities, and so on and so forth. So this cyclical nature can actually engender unemployment at the end of the day. So there are many. There are many. What are the causes of unemployment? Sometimes when we talk about factors of production, and I think from topic 3, we've been talking about the main ones being capital and labor, right? The question becomes, does a given economy has the enough of each to put in place industries, for example, to employ people? Okay, it's populous. And you find this actually being part of the problem of the so-called less developed countries like us. That maybe we are labor abundant, but capital deficient. Right? One will want to just teach it from an economic point of view, but I think I've been teaching economics long enough to know this is actually how the capital system is set. to really nyonya countries like Kenya. Na wakati tunaongelea leadership, hii maneno ya kuimba Kenya kuisha na kuzimia, wakati mnaimba hivyo, mimi mnitoange kwa hizo debate, because at the end of the day, we are having leaders who by their very nature are very, very selfish. Yeah, I believe with appropriate leadership and knowing basically what is good for us as a nation, we will not be talking about this point. Na hata kama tungekuwa tunaiongelelea, tungekuwa tumeona suluhu kwazo. But it is in the interest of Mzungu to come to bamboozle our leaders, to give them a few scrums, a few billions, a few thieving opportunities, na wakinyakua yote. Why shouldn't a country like DRC be prosperous? If DRC is made to actually achieve even a fifth of their potential, that country is richer than even the whole of Europe. That's the truth. That's our country richer than the whole of Europe. Maybe they'll just be competing with China and America in terms of the resources. But they have not been given that chance to even collect themselves as a nation to function. Because it's in the interest of the so-called superpowers to basically keep them busy with wars and all that, while they nyakua these factors of production. When you talk about resources, capital goods, the best minerals are gotten in DRC. They don't have a desert, they have forests, right? Udongo wenye rotuba pia iko huko. So this is a country that even if you give it just 5 years, I don't believe there's any country in Africa that can even come near. Hata sisi hata tujaribu aje. We cannot come near to them. But Kagame must make his billions, and he has to be facilitated by the so-called capitalists, the US, the UK, the Frances of this world, and so on and so forth. So nini itafanya unemployment isiwe kwa country kama hiyo? Bado itakuwa. On a different level, even Kenya. We have very, very good labor, very skilled, but unakuta maybe they are interfering with our governance systems. So even the decisions that are being made, saa zingine unaangalia even unasema hii hata kama mtu hajaenda shule, I think somebody who has a heart for Kenya will be in a position to make a better decision at the end of the day. Right? So unakuta because our capital, especially inanyakuliwa. I have a friend called Dr. Mordecai Ogada who has written a very good book whereby he is positing that even these national parks, hamwezi jua nini zimefichwa huko na hatuambiwi. Something that I've never thought about. I just started thinking about it just in the last 1 year. He is positing that pengine kuna minerals that are there that are very, very important. Wazungu walikuja, wakajua kuna hiyo mineral, wakazizingira, and then they put there Tsavo National Park, Amboseli National Park, and so on and so forth. So it might be that they are mining, they're taking resources there. As we are not even having an idea that we are being impoverished, because it starts by you knowing that you are that rich at the end of the day. So it's a very, very big thing. I wish that even you, wakati mnaingia na mnaanza kufikiria hiyo maneno, wherever you are, there are people of WEM here. Start thinking about these things. You will be the future directors of Kenya Wildlife Services. Maybe you will question na nyinyi ndio mtatuambia kama ni ukweli ama mwalimu alikuwa anaongelea tu stories za jaba. Rapid population growth, do I need to explain that? I think it's self-explanatory, because when population has grown more than maybe the job slots in an economy, unemployment might ensue. Okay. We can talk about distortion of factor prices. Whenever there's a government policies fixing wages above the wages that have been fixed through the process of demand and supply in the labor market, right? Whenever they provide incentive, and sometimes they are well intentioned, but as we normally say, the role of the government at best must be restricted in any kind of market, labor market included. So that when you are talking about even this fixing incentive, there must be incentives that are targeted and they must be temporary. Wakati zinakuwa permanent, we talk about some distortion inevitably happening as a result. Sisi lecturers tunasema haki yetu. I think in Egerton, we are the only ones who, vichwa ngumu, we have still insisted that we teach that it's because of the history we have had anyway, especially over the last 4 years. And I think it works well for you people, I guess. But we are agitating that our wages, amongst many other things, must be increased. And sometimes this unionism is such that maybe it will reach a point whereby I'm being paid a wage that I do not deserve as Nyanjong, higher than I deserve. This is the distortion that actually these people or this is talking about, that maybe I should just be paid that wage that the market can afford, I can demand, and not a shilling more. But unionism does not know that. Unionism just knows that Nyanjong is suffering, and that suffering needs to be brought to a halt at the end of the day. And that's why you hear even people like Trump. Trump was anti-union, and he was very, very clear about that, being anti-union because of these things. Capitalism and unionism are like oil and water at the end of the day, right? Limited product market, when you talk about even countries like Kenya, our exports are primarily low value agricultural goods. And that's actually the worst bit of it. We produce very little, if any, high value goods for the markets, international markets. So our exports are typically low value because of the low price that they command. Because when you hear us being very proud that we produce tea and coffee and what? Is it tourism or horticulture? These are basically low value goods. If you compare with the things that we demand from the national market, cars, we demand the best out of the international market, we end up being losers. Meaning that because we are demanding these high value goods, we are actually favoring the citizens of those countries at the expense of our citizens. If it was the other way, I think we will basically have these high value, high priced goods, and we will be able to even fund these safety nets that are typical of the so-called developed countries. But as we fund them in reverse, because we give low value goods, we demand high value goods. Our product markets are limited because of the low income and elasticity and the low price. Yeah, we talk about rural urban migrations. In institutional economics, we'll talk about also as an addendum to this, the fact that markets are what we call thin markets, especially in the rural area. Somewhere like in Africa, we have very little urban areas. More of what we have are rural areas, and the markets there are thin, meaning that even kama uko na pesa, saa zingine hata kupata hiyo kitu kwa market inakuwa either next to impossible, if at all. So you'll find that even when you are in the rural area, you have to demand the same good or service from outside your locality at the end of the day. But there's also this rural urban migration. People in the rural areas think their heaven is in urban areas. So they migrate from the rural areas. And with that migration, because typically they are low skilled, they are not able to really get the jobs that they think they deserve in the urban space at the end of the day, right? Educational systems. Right now, you can now say we are transiting to CBC. I mean, me, Kenya, I've never had a problem with us coming up with the plans. And if you read about CBC at face value, it seems to be okay. But I don't know why I still fear it, because Kenya, when it comes to, we've always had a problem of implementation. Ukifika hapo Nyanjonga anakumbuka ya kuwa he needs to make his billions, na hapa ndio ata make his billions. I'll have to influence policies in such a way that I make my billions. I don't want to know whether this program or this policy will succeed or not. I must have my billions. Okay. So I fear the way we are implementing this CBC. I fear. I read it and it is good. Sikatai. By the end of the day, Kenyans being Kenyans, there's nothing I fear more than how we are doing it. We are doing it the wrong way. I happen to be a board member of a certain secondary school here in Nakuru. And 2 years ago, I think they built a classroom. A classroom typically costs maybe 2 to 3 million. 1 million in real cost, but 2 million lazima ikuliwe. This being Kenya, right? And we put it up, and I go to one of the meetings. They are like, this one will accommodate the junior secondary. It makes sense. Only for the policy to change. And I think that happened to each and every school, because I know for a fact, Kilimo Secondary School there, I saw a very, very nice building there. I was being told it was for JSS. Sasa JSS mnataka kuamua ya kuwa ibaki kwa primary. So I look at it like this, I'm like, these are things that should have been thought about and implemented in a very, very organized way, without really having this problem of where should we, should the JSS. Sasa ni kama tunatengeneza gari tayari kama tuko barabara na hiyo gari tukitembea. That's the Kenyan way, and it's so dispiriting. Mhm. So educational system also, because sometimes maybe we'll end up with low-skilled people. Now you can see they are frustrating people in the university who will want to read and become a lecturer like Nyanjo 5, 10 years from now. Na hizi shida ambazo sasa mnaona lecturer, they have been out for what? 2 months? Who will want to read? Tunataka kufanya vitu vingine, but also we'll also expect that wakati tutazaa na tumepeleka watoto university, that they'll get that high quality education. Shauri yenu wa Kenya. This country is really, I'm sorry to say, going to the dogs as a result of really people not really thinking through some of these things. We are really playing what they call the Russian roulette with the futures of our kids in a way that is, you must think about it and just wonder sometimes where we are going with this. Lakini nikiuliza mtu hapa ataniambia usiguse mlima, mwingine ataniambia sijui nisiguze ponde la ufa. Huyo ni mtu yetu, wewe enda huko Lakeside, right? So we'll have to reckon with the consequences collectively as Kenyans. Seasonality in production, of course, and especially when you talk about a country like Kenya, when you talk about us being an agricultural economy, sorry to say, we'll have to reckon with the fact that at some point, some people will just be unemployed simply because of the seasonal nature of some of these so-called big sectors in the economy. The big revenue earners in the economy are seasonal in nature when you talk about agriculture, when you talk about tourism at the end of the day. So what's the consequence? Umesoma university, umesomea geology, hakuna kazi. But kile kitu ambayo nataka ni warai nayo saizi ni whatever you are doing and your first years. All right, go to the labor market and you see whether there's somewhere where your job, the job that you anticipate to be doing that really subscribes to your area. Whether you are doing food and nutrition, whether you are doing horticulture, whether you are doing food science, whether you are doing WM, whether you are doing BMed, wale wengine ni wagani, aquatic sciences. Lazima ujiangalie na uone where you see yourself. Na kama ujioni, maybe unaweza sema yes, the 4 years in the universities is a time of growth, lakini pengine nikimaliza, let me look at going to something. So you arm yourself with another skill set. Na siku hizi, as I said, we are in the world whereby I think learning and relearning is non-negotiable. Even me, after I put my PhD down in the next few months, I want to start learning coding. Na coding mnaona ni kitu ambayo inafanywa na watoto hata wa primary school. I've never done it, but I know. This is a skill that I don't think you'll be able to exist peacefully in the next few years if you don't have it. And maybe we are even already at that point whereby you will not be able to really do it or exist peacefully without having such skills. Data science, vitu kama hizo, right? Data manipulation and all that. I think I have the data science thing. I only need just to even come up with, when you talk about modeling, I really need to know how to code them so that you can automate some of those processes at the end of the day. So that if you don't do that, of course, if you are a person who is rigid, you are not able to learn, you are not able to unlearn, you are not able to relearn, you will be a waste in this so-called knowledge economy. And that's the truth of it. The higher dependency ratio, what do we mean by dependency ratio? Working versus non-working population within a given economy. Remember when we were defining unemployment, we talked about that working population, and we defined it as persons in the economy who are between 15 and 65 years of age. So meaning that there are people who are below, there are people who are above this. These are the non-working population. Mtu ambaye yuko above, he has retired, he has health issues. One will hope that either the government can look after him or he has people looking after him. But if he has people looking after him, they'll be here. So it will be high if this part is larger. If the non-working part is larger than compared to the working, one will imagine that the ratio will be higher. And any given economy will wish for this to be at an optimal place in terms of the ratio. And what do I mean by optimal? I've had a statistic whereby they say for every non-working person, there should be 2 working people for an optimal economy, right? 1 working person for every, no, 2 working for every 1 non-working, right? And that's why you see right nowadays, I think economies pushing up the retirement age. My mom 20 years ago retired at 55. Nowadays, we talk about people retiring at 60. I think they're even talking about even pushing it forward. In more developed countries, you talk about even, I think they even talk about 70 in some countries. Simply because of this, even them, they have been caught up by this higher dependency ratio. And you find actually that really putting strain, especially on the safety nets that they will have developed those many years back. right? Um, Increase in social problems. When I wrote it, I think Mungiki was a problem. Nowadays, I don't hear them. But when you think about even robbery, when you think about drug addiction, when you think about even the high sex incidences, and maybe even some of these things that we are seeing, even emerging like femicide, who knows? Uh, Although hapa Kenya huwezi jua, stories huwa ni mingi. But you'll find that they are in many, many ways informed by this, the fact that we are having this very, very high unemployment. If we were low, I think that even that incentive to be roped in to go and do some of these anti-social problems will be low to non-existent. Lakini saa zingine maybe mtu akikwambia 1,000 and you've not seen 1,000 for the last one week, the incentive to go for that 1,000 is there. Okay. So drug addiction, prostitution, right? Even some of these things, like even these things happening like femicide, you never know. They could just be asymptomatic of the fact that there is a high level of unemployment within the society, overcrowding as a result of rural-urban migration, loss of human capital. And I believe that this is tied in to the first example, because when you talk about human capital, especially education, if you come, you do VM and you don't practice it in the future, or you will not have gotten some skill set that you learned in your process of doing VM that will be using to earn a living in the future, it can be argued that the country goes to a loss as a result, right? Of course, pahali kuna social welfare programs, saizi unasikia tunalilia shisha. And we live in a very interesting country whereby even the people who are the implementers do not even know what it's all about. But it's a social welfare thing anyway. Na pengine, it's always about the motive. We start these things because we want to become billionaires, not because we want to help wananchi, right? But if you go in countries whereby these things work, yeah, hapo ndio mahali unakuta wanasiasa wanaanza complain that we need to decrease because the cake is becoming, maybe the portion which we have to dedicate to this social welfare is becoming large, and that means less for other arguably more critical areas at the end of the day. Right? So how can we combat them? Right? Private sector led job creation strategies. A country like Kenya, which is labor intensive, we don't bring machinery to to do what? To produce goods and services, but you leverage on the fact that in country we are more labor rich as a country than capital rich. So you bring forth machinery or capital goods that can encourage the employment of more persons at the end of the day. Relevant educational system, you heard me ranting about CBC. On paper, arguably a good system, but we have people who have their kids in high-end private schools here in Kenya or even abroad. So do they care that your kid hajawahi ona daftari tangu January, ama anasomea chini ya mti, ama klasi yake haijawahi fanyiwa plastering for the last 10 years or so? People don't care. That's the tragedy, if you ask me, of this country called Kenya. Minimization of seasonal unemployment. How do we do this? Minimization of seasonal unemployment. Of course, when you talk about product diversification, maybe let's not have only one agricultural product. We can leverage on us having more so that we can sell to the international market more products. in different markets. Can talk about intensive rural development. We've been doing it in Kenya for the last 40 years. You come mazao. We can talk about FDI, providing incentives for foreign direct investment, meaning that when tourists come from abroad to Kenya, you don't harass them. You don't put them in JKIA for 8 hours and you harass them until they pay tax for their phones, etc. and etc. Right? Of course, we can talk about encouragement of the use of domestic resources. Okay. So that's all that I would wish to speak about. I cannot see any question in chat. I cannot see any question or any raised hands. So I'll trust that tumemakinika in terms of topic 6, meaning that I'll just about to begin a new topic, our penultimate topic, topic 7. And here I'll just maybe spend the next 20 or so minutes, and then we can call it a day, meaning we are meeting on Monday, one way or another. So meaning that maybe the cut, if it must be there, will be done next week from 3 on Thursday. Same way, I'll provide a link. You shall do the cut at a certain hour. It shall be, I'll close the form. So it will be a 1-hour cut. Measurement of national income. When you hear about GDP, when you hear about GNP, when you hear about that last year, Kenya made this amount of monies, how do we go about determining the same, right? How do we measure national income? It's the second macroeconomic topic that I wish us to discuss. What is national income counting, right? You must think about this as an accounting method, but done on a macro scale, whereby the government will seek to measure how healthy an economy is, by how much did the economy grow year on year, what is the level of economic activity, and at a larger level, because when you talk about development, is not a thing that you see it in terms of 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. It's normally seen as a long-term thing. We can talk about also seeing about economic development in terms of maybe the structural changes within an economy after a certain period of time, right? Whenever you'll hear about people talking about the contribution of agriculture to the economy is this percent, who will have determined that? The contribution of manufacturing to the economy is this percent. Here I have people who are doing wildlife. The contribution of wildlife, because we talk about tourism, to the economy is this percent. Where do we get that statistics? We necessarily get that statistics by the use of national income accounting. I can see something in chat. Is inflation also a cause of unemployment? Indirectly, yes. Indirectly, yes, but as we saw, inflation must be handled as I said, a necessary thing in an economy, just like that heat that is produced by the engine of a car, or any heat in a production process. Like even when you talk about a car, that is inflation. So maybe when you talk about hyperinflation, because you can talk about your people pricing themselves out of the market. And if I have a farm And if maybe circumstances demand that I charge a price that people cannot afford, at some point, because of the low sales, I'll be forced to shut up, shut shop, and go and maybe even invest my money somewhere else. So indirectly, it's not a one-for-one thing. It's not like I'll say that kama hakuna inflation, maneno ni mazuri. As I said, there's a good type of inflation that is inevitable and must be expected in an economy and planned for, and there's the not so good type. So if it's the not so good now, it persist, it will cause unemployment. So the short answer to you is yes, but not directly. It's not a direct one-for-one relationship. But having said that, there's something that we call Phillips curve. I think it's normally beyond our course that actually tries to relate the inflation rate and the what and unemployment rate. Na kuna vile, I think somebody called Phillips in the 1940s discovered that there is a relationship between the two. How is low price of a product leading to unemployment? Well, what do you mean? I have to be incentivized as a business person to continue uh, selling a good or service. So if I understand you correctly that the price is low, uh, ikienda below the point at which I can be encouraged to sell it, I shut up shop. And if this happen on a macro level within an economy, if I shut up shop, means people will be sacked. The same way I've talked about G4S sacking people. I think they were talking about 400. Tile and Carpet. Tile and Carpet has been a company, I remember I used to see them advertising even when I was in primary. So 40 years and above. For the first time, I'm hearing them sacking. I think yesterday I was seeing like 4 companies sacking. Last year, I think we lost about 72,000 jobs in the EPZ. Part of it is this, because the cost of doing business in Kenya is becoming too prohibitive, and companies are not able to raise their prices to match the cost of production or cost of doing business. So in other words, they have been priced out. Now, when they are priced out, if you are working in those companies close up and they go. So in a short way, Elvis Sanya, that's basically how one could see this, the low price of a product basically leading to unemployment in that way. Because one business is about incurring some costs, passing those costs to consumers plus some profit margin. And if this profit margin is swallowed up through that, because sometimes the price is such that you cannot pass, either you cannot pass or you're not allowed to pass that price to consumers, at some point you have to make a business decision and say, let me go somewhere else. The economy of Kenya is not making sense, and I don't see it making sense in the near future. So you'll confirm whether I have answered you. If I'm not, you will confirm where I have not answered. As I normally say, hii Kenya, usikuje kwa daktari useme ninaumwa na mwili yote. That is one of the hardest question to go to a daktari na umwambie. Hata kama ni Mkenya hapa, hata utafukuzwa. Okay. So I trust that you've heard people asking some of these questions. What is the projected growth, economic activity, development? Will all be able to answer them using national income accounting. So what are the key concepts? What are the accounts that normally are used to derive gross domestic product? What are final goods and services? What are intermediate goods and services? What is gross domestic product? What is gross national product? What is net national product? And maybe other NIA concepts that we shall be talking about. So when you talk about the accounts, because we must see it as an accounting method, as I said, and normally there's a government agency in most economies tasked with producing and maintaining these NIPAs. And we call it in Kenya, for the longest time, me when I was doing my degree, this is how old I am. It used to be called the Central Bureau of Statistics. Right? and it used to be a government agency. Nowadays, I believe it's a parastatal that is referred to as Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. When it was a Central Bureau of Statistics, I think it used to be a department of the Ministry of Planning, if I'm not wrong. So they are the agency that is tasked with producing and maintaining this. Kwa hivyo wakati tunataka kitu yoyote, not only for this GDP, GNP, GNNP and all that, but many other statistical reports, they are normally tasked with producing the same. In America, actually, I'm told when you are doing your PhD on masters, you really will need to go to the field to do this. Tayari unakuta hii data unakuwa umewekewa mahali. So maybe it's only when maybe you need maybe high quality data is when now you can do further data collection. But the basic data collection, I think the American KNBS equivalent normally will have gone the yard in ensuring that this has been collected. So ndio watu tunaulizanga, what is the GDP? What is the GNP? What is NNP? And we shall define them in the next few seconds. When you talk about final goods and intermediate goods, it's very, very important for us for that distinction to be made. It's really when we are talking about now counting goods and services to be included in the calculation of gross domestic product, of gross national product. There's always that fear and that danger of what is called double counting. And we shall be saying the limitations of national income accounting. One of them will be this. And when you talk about double counting, is that sometimes you might find a good that is intermediate being counted as final, meaning that it had already been counted or accounted for somewhere, and yet it's being counted again, hence the double counting. So we'll define final goods as those goods that are produced for final use, right? And because we are normally told that in defining, you are not supposed to use the same word, and normally